All right, I'm here for the next episode of the Powerless Podcast with James, who is, I think you said the guitarist, right, of the band Fall 50 Feet out of West Virginia. Riff Master. That's what I should have said. Riff Master of Fall 50 Feet out of West Virginia. Great metalcore band. Happy to have you on. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm not working and I'm talking about music, so I am happy.
I love that attitude. That's fantastic. I feel that way as well. I didn't have to work today. I usually am on Mondays, and I did not have to. So happy to have you here. Happy to talk about the music. When I first stumbled upon your guys' band, I think it was through social media. I heard the title track, or at least a riff from the title of the title track of your upcoming LP that's out on May 2nd called Counterfeit Recollections. It was the guitar riff that you've got kind of like I think it's some pinch harmonics or false harmonics you've got going on in the breakdown. I think there's a little bit of like a tempo shift there in the middle of the song. And I heard that and I was like, oh yeah, I got to talk to these guys immediately.
Oh yeah.
And so you guys were nice enough to send over the album that you're putting out. This is your second full-length record, if my memory serves me right.
Yep.
And it's absolutely fantastic. I love a lot of the influences in it. They kind of seem to come from everything from sort of modern metal to classic metalcore to some of the post-hardcore and emo bands, everything from the Warped scene to much heavier music. So yeah, I was very impressed with it, and I'm just really happy to have you on.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm glad you get it. You definitely said a lot of the things that I feel like we are influenced by. We kind of just are influenced by everything. So it's cool. It's cool to see people pick up on that because our goal is to just kind of do what we think is cool. And we kind of think a lot of shit is cool.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the way it should be, right? Like nobody listens to, I mean, some people do, but I would say like very few musicians listen to just like one little niche subgenre, like whether it's hardcore, melodic hardcore, whatever other subgenres are out there,
those are the
eclectic.
Two. Those are the main two, I think.
Yeah, I think, hardcore and melodic hardcore. Really covered the gambit there with what I was trying to say.
Those are really the only things we're influenced by. So that's mostly what I was talking about. So I'm glad we got that out of the way.
Yeah, 100%. Well, James, to start things off here, I think what we'll do today is kind of break down where your start in music was, where the band got together, and obviously talk a lot about the upcoming album, which this episode will be out, I think, the Monday after the release. But what I like to do with people, especially when I meet them for the first time, when I talk to a fellow musician, especially a guitar player, I'm an amateur guitar player myself, like to write a lot of riffs and things of that nature when I have time. What have you been listening to lately? What's sort of your Spotify on repeat or the equivalent of? It could be everything from the biggest band you listen to a local band you'd give a shout out to that you've listened to several times or played shows with. But what are a couple of bands you've been listening to a lot lately?
We can check out my on repeat. Yeah, right now I honestly am not listening to a lot of riffs. It doesn't look like. I'm not even in Riff Village, which is pretty funny. But my top song is a song by this band called Feeble Little Horse. They're like a shoegazy indie kind of band out of Pittsburgh. Uh-huh. And I got into them on their like last record and have just been enjoying. They had a record before that and just kind of like jamming the heck out of that for the last year or so because they have a wild sound. So that's definitely, a lot of people probably already know them, but if you haven't checked out Feeble Little Horse.
I'm unfamiliar, but yeah, they're pretty big. They got over, again, monthly listeners aren't everything, but they've got over 200,000 monthly listeners on Spotify alone. I'm checking out, their last album, Girl with Fish. Is that the one you're talking about that you've been checking out?
That shit's crazy. Like, it's just like the tones of it. I don't know if you listen to a lot of like shoegaze stuff, but I don't even think this really sounds like traditional shoegaze, but the tones are insane. The vocals are still very present in the mix, though, which is something that I feel like a lot of bands, they kind of bury the vocals in the mix. And I really like how it's so weird, but still like kind of accessible vocally. So that's a band that's been on repeat.
I'm gonna check this out. I saved it. I'm gonna check this out right after this recording. This sounds right up my alley. Very cool.
Heck yeah, it's very cool. It's like, I don't know. It's just super cool, super interesting, super unique. That album is like honestly pretty experimental, but the one before it has check out the song Chores on the album before that, because like catchy ass song, catchy as heck, like a lot of catchy songs that are still very weird. So cool if you like that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Other than that, I got a lot of Earl Sweatshirt in my on repeat. Earl is my goat. I'm kind of constantly listening to him. He's just like someone who never really leaves the rotation, to be honest.
It's funny. I haven't listened to him in years, but I remember when, there was a whole deal with him with Odd Future. And I think the first song I ever heard from him was Earl, that was with Odd Future. And I just remember thinking, this kid looks like he's like 16, which I think he was. And just like making the craziest music I've, like the lyrics and like the flow of it was so insane. It had me like hooked instantly. So again, this is reminding me, he's got an album out in 2023. I had no idea. I actually got to go check that out after this as well.
Maybe one of the biggest reasons I connect to him as much as I do is because I have been listening to him since like the Odd Future years when I was a kid, and like watching him change over the years, his kind of like evolution as an artist, and he really switched his like kind of style and his approach to like what he was doing with his art, like very inspirational, very like boundary pushing in a lot of ways for like someone to do like insane switches. If you haven't really checked him out other than that like early stuff, I recommend the album Some Rap Songs. It's like it's a crazy album, very short, but like just sounds you couldn't like dream of. Just really awesome stuff, and it's a completely like self-produced kind of project that he did. So that's an all-time album for me. Sorry, go ahead. Other than that, I was just gonna say there's just a few other bands in here like Fontaine's DC that's been on repeat a lot, and I got They Are Gutting a Body of Water, some I don't know, just stuff like that. But I listen to a lot of stuff all the time, but that's kind of what seeps into the on repeat that I'm like kind of on rotation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it makes sense, I think, specifically for somebody like Earl Sweatshirt. A lot of the guys from Odd Future in general, with the trajectory of their careers and like the changes they've made over time. Of like, I think there's a reason why a lot of people in like the alternative and like heavy community, like a lot of people really like those sorts of artists, and it's because they in their own right, they push a lot of boundaries. It's very like punk rock. You know what I mean? How a lot of those guys like, not that the music sounds punk, but like just like the pushing of the boundaries or the very like DIY approach to the instrumentals or the beat, as well as like the production in general and the vocals. Like, I don't know, there's something about it. There's a through line there where like,
it's called
I don't know,
real shit.
Yeah. It's called real
people
shit.
Like us like real shit.
Yeah.
And that's that through line right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head with that one. Well, great. And you've given me homework.
That's what I describe Fall 50 Feet as. It's just being our realest selves. It's just real shit.
Yeah. And I think that's what people look for above all else, above genre, above preference of what kind of music they listen to on a day-to-day basis, is if something's real, authentic, and driven by the artist for the art's sake, right? And I think you guys obviously do that. A lot of the music feels very, I mean, it's obviously well produced and well mixed and all that, but it feels very raw, like the energy, you know what I mean, that you put into a lot of this. And so I really appreciate that. And again, through line from the bands and the artists you're referencing there. I guess to start off with you, since you're guitar player of the band, riff master, as you said. When did music first become like a big formative force for you? When was the first time you kind of like or some bands or kind of influences you had that brought you out of sort of like just hearing what your parents put on the radio or what other people were listening to, and kind of like pulled you into this sort of heavy alternative, whatever you want to call it, space?
Well, you know, my father is a musician. He was kind of like blues rock, classic rock sort of dude. And then my mom was like mostly listening to country at home, which like when I was a kid, I wasn't really into it. So I kind of rejected country, but I rocked with rock from like a decently young age. But what grabbed me was I think it was Linkin Park was the first thing that really like grabbed hold of me. And that was the first favorite band I had. So that sort of like that's when music kind of like went to the center pretty quick. It was like I listened to Linkin Park. I was instantly singing Linkin Park songs in my room, like alone into like a remote. You know, it was just like instantly. I just kind of wanted to do that. Like, so Linkin Park definitely was there. Fall Out Boy was another big one right there. And then at some point, I started playing guitar just because like my dad did, and like wanted to kind of learn an instrument because I was getting interested in music. So when I got a guitar, that's when I think my taste sort of started to form, because like obviously Linkin Park and Fall Out Boy are like iconic bands. I'll defend them till the day I die, even though like I'm not really rocking with Fall Out Boy's like post hiatus music, to be honest. But like they're still like a legendary band, and they come from like a hardcore scene, and that's kind of awesome. But the bands that pulled me into the more metal place were like your typical Metallica and Megadeth. And then from there, my brother showed me like Trivium and Bullet for My Valentine. And those ones were the ones that kind of got me, which I'm getting to see them literally in like a week. So I'm pretty stoked.
Yeah, I mean, I think Linkin Park is one that most people from our relative, I'm guessing you're like within several years of age of me, that I think is formative for just about everybody that got into somewhat of alternative or heavy music, right? Like because there's such a it's like such a gateway drug, like it's such like, they had a lot of pop sensibilities. They were played on the radio a lot, one of the most successful bands commercially of all time.
And they had screaming.
They had a lot of angst. They pulled a lot of influences from both hip hop and like, older metal bands and hardcore bands and things like that as well. Yeah. Fall Out Boy, I'm from the Chicago area, like about an hour outside of Chicago. And like band has been a legend here since from the drop, since obviously they're from the area. Same deal. I'm not comparing the two. I would say Linkin Park's much more legendary, but I'm biased because it's like my favorite band of all time. But Fall Out Boy, another one for people where like it pulled you in with rocking guitars, and the drummer of that band, you can hear the biggest influence of him being influenced by heavy music, right, and stuff like that. And that can really pull you into all these different things, especially when you start playing guitar, like you said. You kind of get into these more intricate bands like Trivium, Bullet for My Valentine. Trivium is like a top tier band when it comes to instrumentation and just like work ethic when it comes to a band. So that's a great influence to have right there. When you got into these bands, I'm just curious because your band obviously has a lot of influences, like we've said. Did you also get into sort of like the more like Warped Tour esque bands as well, like sort of that post hardcore like emo stuff? Yeah.
It was like sixth grade. Sixth grade was like Metallica, Megadeth, into Trivium, Bullet, and like Children of Bodom. And then from there in seventh grade, it was like I Set My Friends on Fire, A Day to Remember, Attack Attack. Those were like the three that like pulled the MySpace bands. In. Yeah. And so that's when, and I got into all of that because I was a YouTube kid. I was like an insular, like I was out in the country, like middle of nowhere, like very, very small, like nothing, like we don't even have a stoplight sort of deal, like we're a village sort of deal. It's like
I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
So it's like I was lucky enough to somehow get internet at an early age, like despite the area not really having a lot of like internet options. Like I think you couldn't really get internet in the village other than like where we were kind of just luckily we were in the line of like coverage for AT&T. So I got like decently fast internet when I was like maybe 11, and that and YouTube kind of changed my life, and I was just able to find a lot of music and connect with a lot of people despite living out in the middle of nowhere. And like I didn't even really have like there was no sort of scene in my area, but it was like there was a scene in the greater area I live in, but I was like too out in the middle of nowhere to really have any friends to know anything about that until I was about 17.
Yeah, so that obviously pulls you in. You're probably pretty similar to me, where you play, you get into all these different kinds of music. You're able to access it through whatever internet access you have at the time in your rural area, right? And I don't know if you're like me, but yeah, when you live out in the middle of nowhere, especially like before you have a driver's license or whatever else, all you can do is like check out these bands and play guitar all day. Like that's what you've got, right?
And that's how we got here. And
Yeah.
ADHD.
That too. That very much as well. I identify with that as well. So that obviously pulls you in. That's the question I was going to ask. Because you guys are you from West Virginia originally, like from the get go, or?
It's a complicated story, Brandon. It's a complicated story.
I'm here for it.
Basically, the area I live in is kind of known as the Ohio Valley, but it's inclusive of basically like the southeastern side of Ohio. So basically everything below Columbus, like east and south of Columbus, is kind of like the valley. But it also includes the most northern part of West Virginia, which is like kind of like a peninsula that goes up like in between Ohio and Pennsylvania. So you have this small strip of land in between Ohio and Pennsylvania. And so you even get some Pennsylvania in there, kind of in the Ohio Valley too, or the greater Ohio Valley area, which is like kind of right below Pittsburgh. So the closest big city we have is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so like you kind of got a lot of runoff of like Pittsburghian kind of stuff, Yinzer culture coming to the valley or whatever. But yeah, the area I'm from is called the Ohio Valley. I was born in Wheeling, West Virginia, and I currently reside just across the river from Wheeling in Ohio.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for going over, because yeah, you kind of as someone that lives in the Midwest, where I live like smack dab in the middle of a pretty big state, sometimes you forget how often in certain areas you can just like arbitrarily cross different state lines on like a 20-minute commute even,
it's
or something.
It's a tri-state area, and explaining this to people when they ask where we're from on like a tour or something can be like excruciating, because you kind like people don't know what you're talking about. You like, yeah, I live in Ohio, and they're like, Columbus? I'm like, no. And they're like, Cleveland? I'm like, no. I'm like, Cincinnati? I'm like, dude, 4 hours away. It's like the opposite side of the state. It's just like I'm from the middle of nowhere for real. But
yeah,
I kind of enjoy that.
Yeah, I think there's a specialness to that I've kind of grown to appreciate the last several years. I think obviously there
growing up. Well, at least I did.
Yeah, yeah. I always wanted to, because I grew up like very rural but pretty close to Chicago, and I had a lot of friends that lived like where they could just like hop on a train and go right into the city or whatever the case may be. And you're like, that is the peak of luxury right there or whatever. And it's like, actually, now that I'm a little bit older, I just want to be left alone. So that actually sounds pretty great, but yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. You kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. Obviously, closest city to you has been Pittsburgh. You grew up in this kind of tri-state area of a little sliver of West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, and that it took quite a while, almost to the end of kind of high school, for you to kind of get into a scene due to that fact, right?
Yeah, me and my friends, like, I pretty much forced my friends to learn how to play some instruments, like, sort of deal. So, like, it was very weird. Like, I went into high school, and when I went into high school, you know, most schools have like a marching band. Well, my school was like so small, and like that sort of thing was just not like popular in like the middle of nowhere country. Like everyone thought marching bands were like stupid or something, you know. It's just kind of like the culture of the area a lot of people had. So no one wanted to do it. So the band director had an idea of like doing a rock band instead of a marching band, and I was like the only person who knew how to play an instrument. And that's kind of how I like first played with anyone else. I played with people who literally like didn't know how to play anything. So it was kind of like cool but not cool because they kind of like were not very good. And I was like already like I wasn't very good either, but I was much better, you know, like I was at least a beginner, you know. So
Absolutely.
I just started making my friends play instruments after that and started like a band, but I I started a band online before I formed anything in person with my first band. So it was very, very internet activity based.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense for the area. It can be tough, especially in high school, where maybe people either don't have a lot of funds to get an instrument, or don't depending upon where you live. It's not like in a very rural area you might have like a big plethora of like teachers that could let like after school conventional music teachers and everything in between. YouTube probably wasn't at where it's at now, where literally like everybody can learn everything from like searching in Google to find YouTube video.
Guitar, baby.
Oh yeah,
it was Ultimate Guitar.
Yeah. And then I remember I was in the same boat again. Like I was using, playing guitar way too many hours, probably every day after school or after work after school, and looking up Ultimate Guitar tabs and not understanding why it didn't sound right. And you didn't the thought didn't cross your mind at 16 that maybe somebody didn't know what the fuck they were talking about when they tabbed it out, but yeah, that was like the early precursor for me too.
If I didn't have Ultimate, like a 17-year-old who tabbed it out, and you're a 16-year-old trying to read a 17-year-old's tab.
Yeah. And sometimes they would submit it and they would just do it in a text document, and like the format of the like 6 strings would be off, and yeah. Oh yeah, just in a Word document.
Yeah, well, like I hate tabbing, and I can't doing all that.
Yeah.
So, but I have to sometimes for like our other guitarists to like learn a part, or like I have to tab like bass tabs for like bassists to learn sometimes. So it's just like, yeah, I'll do a tab. And then, like, my guitarist will be, like, playing something wrong, and I'll be like, dude, you're playing that wrong. I can't believe how much of an idiot you are. And he'll be like, that's how you tabbed it. I'm like, no fucking way. And then I look, and it definitely is how I tabbed it. Just because that is, like, a disorienting process. I start tabbing and just go into, like, blackout mode. You're like, it's bad.
Oh, yeah. It's so tedious. I remember... the metalcore band I was in college, that we did a little bit of touring and stuff like that, and got to play some out of state shows. We had our biggest show coming up, and our singer, our secondary singer, we had a lead, vocalist that screamed, but our other singer and guitar player was actually going to be gone in Sweden at the time. So I had to get a fill-in guitar player and a fill-in singer to flesh things out. And it was the first time I really had to
fill-in singer is crazy.
You're telling me it was a shit show. Surprised that this band didn't last. But no, I went to go tab it out, and I was like, holy shit, this is going to take me like 12 years. Like, this is so, intimidating, of like putting in the right hammer offs and putting in the, what I mean?
Writing riff soup. We got to stop it. We could have had a verse chorus.
Zeros and ones.
It took me 22 minutes to tab out, but here we are.
But yeah, no, that's so funny and so relatable. Before we get going more into like how the band formed, I do have a quick question for you. In your promo pictures, there's 3 of you in the picture, right? So why don't you tell me what each person in your band does, and then do you have fill-ins and things like that for certain parts, or just kind of let me know like what's Fall 50 Feet look like overall as a band lineup?
So our core full-time members are me, David Wallace, who is the vocalist, and Anthony Buck, who is the other guitar player. And yeah, we usually have bass and drum fill-ins. We had a drummer up until the point of recording our album. but right after we recorded it, we parted ways. So last year, it was just a lot of grinding, trying to save up money to do everything for the album. So we were just kind of like chilling, and now we're like finding fill-ins right now, but we just want to make sure to find the right people to be in the band who like mesh well and ultimately have the same goals, because like it's a little harder when you get older, like to find people like to play with in some sort of ways. Like a lot of people, especially drummers, are already in like bands, especially the drummers that are around like our age. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. It's just an interesting process, and it's nothing we want to rush. So yeah, we just usually have friends play with us or whatever, like whoever we can find that we know tangibly.
Of course, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's the smart way to go, rather than I've been on the opposite end of that, where you just try to find somebody really quick, throw them in the band, and next thing you know, you're like spending hours and hours with somebody that you don't even enjoy being around very often. Like, it's good to be thoughtful about making those decisions for sure.
Yeah,
so that makes a lot of sense.
Sometimes you just get people who come in and like they're more of like, hire, and when you just hire someone, sometimes you don't know what you're getting. So it's like, it's good to have like some like, people with good reputations to come in and fill spots,
Absolutely. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for going over that real quick. But I guess that kind of brings us to how this band formed. So again, you said you had been in, your first band. You had also done like a project on, first band project online, things of that nature. Where does Fall 50 Feet kind of come into play for you? How does this band kind of come together? And just speak to that a little bit.
So me and Dave met on the internet, on like Tumblr back in the day. Kind of joked about starting a band. Then we just kind of like did start a band. So that kind of was like the internet band. But after a couple years after high school was over, like Dave ended up moving down here. So did another member who we all basically were in that band for years. And at one point, our drummer had left that band right before we went to record our album. And so we like went through a kind of strenuous process of like the album being recorded. And on the other side, we kind of came out and decided to start a new band with the material. And that material is what became Fall 50.
Makes a lot of sense. That tends to be what happens, right? You find one or two people out of these projects that kind of go by the wayside and actually start getting something going with like the same drive that you both have. That's a pretty, I don't want to say like conventional, but typical trajectory, I think, for a lot of people that like have drive and have a work ethic when it comes to music. Kind of going into this band, obviously we've got your album coming out on May 2nd that is called Counterfeit Recollections, 12 tracks, which is like a pretty decent sized album, especially for this day and age of the streaming age, where sometimes people try to just like release, an EP a year, or they'll put out at most 10 tracks or whatever the case may be. But this album, first and foremost, feels like a lot of my favorite, post-hardcore, metalcore, whatever subgenre you want to throw out there, records that I've listened to over the years that has a lot of, a little bit of theatricality to it. You've got certainly a lot of, skit is the wrong word. That's what you tend to talk about with like a rap album, but you've got like those phone calls and these different samples and things that go into it that make it really cohesive. So I guess when it comes to this record that again is coming out on May 2nd, what was sort of the songwriting process for you guys? What is the songwriting process for you in general? And what were kind of your intentions and thoughts behind putting together Counterfeit Recollections?
Well, so our guitar player, Anthony, he joined the band like kind of, after we had released our first album. Like he started as a fill-in and ended up joining. And at that time, the band was kind of changing. We kind of already had enough material to do an album with. But our like bass player who was in the band to begin with was on his way out. Just had like personal life stuff to deal with, so he exited and Anthony joined, and that kind of changed the dynamic of the band a little bit, and it also changed our goals because we were also touring and playing shows and kind of seeing what about our music went over better and what didn't go over as good. And so we were kind of like taking everything into consideration when deciding basically to scrap. I wanted to write a collaborative thing with Anthony. And so we kind of scrapped all of my ideas that we had for like the first iteration of the album, and we brought to just like more demos that we had been writing in kind of a different style than what we were originally going for. Me and Anthony met up for like 2 weeks or so and kind of like just listened to all our demos and started like picking out ones we were like stoked on and working on them, refining them, and like changing things, adding things, like taking things away, like just basically 2 weeks straight of working on songs every day. And this is basically what came out. Like I think we like maybe added one or like a couple little things here and there afterward, but like that's basically how the album came together writing wise. Like it was instrumentally, at least it was kind of like just me and Chaboy. Like Chaboy, that's his nickname. I have to call him Anthony for this. I slipped up. Now it's gonna live in infamy. But we just kind of wanted to, it wasn't intentional that we wanted to split it down the middle, but the album almost became basically like half his songs, half my songs, and like a couple more collaborative, like split in the middle songs, specifically like the Kingsport Curse. That's pretty much a 50-50 sort of like songwriting, like sort of deal. The way which that song happened was like Anthony had written half of that song, or maybe like the main kind of initial riffs in it, just while he was at my house on my computer when I was like at work or something. And I came to it probably like a month or so later and just like started tacking stuff on and kind of like rounded out the song. And I think we might have worked on a little bit more, but that was one that was like, feels like very much both of our songs. And that was kind of cool. This was also the first time I really worked with anyone else, like guitar and like just like composition wise. Like it's usually been like mostly just me and like a drummer, you know, like not really like changing too much of the general like melodies or, you know, guitar parts or anything like that.
Did you find, I mean, you kind of already said it was a positive experience, but did you find that was easy to do with like the collaboration? Did you find it was like a little bit of like a humbling experience for you? How was that kind of coming from being maybe more like the single, you know, brain when it comes to like the riffs and the guitar work to this collaboration? Was that an easy transition for you? So for some people, it could be quite, it could be a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Problematic, I guess, than they initially would think. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it went pretty well. I mean, my biggest problem was getting like just like worn out with like the computer, because like we weren't practicing these songs with a drummer or anything. We were very much writing in the DAW and whatnot. So I think that part of it, I got really tired. I hate looking at the computer screen for too long. It just like starts pissing me off and like whatnot. So, but once we kind of like learned to switch between on that role and like kind of take turns, it was a pretty seamless process. It was honestly like went swimmingly, and we have different brains, and we both like, I think Chaboy Anthony is able to have a very like non-ego when it comes to writing. I like definitely have sort of an ego that needs checked sometimes, but ultimately I am just trying to like make a good song, and I'm not like too wrapped up in myself to acknowledge that. I just like do take my ideas like pretty seriously. So, but there was really never any contention with us because Anthony just doesn't take stuff like too deep or seriously that we there. I think that's what's most important when you're collaborating with anyone. You have to be willing to fuck up in front of someone, and you have to be comfortable fucking up in front of someone. So when you're like fully comfortable with just doing anything in front of someone, that's when like the best stuff can come out. it's not good working with other people when you feel like you have to be on guard in any way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've had collaborations like that before where, yeah, it feels like nails on a chalkboard because you like are afraid of fucking up or doing something the other person won't find appealing and you have trouble being yourself. But when you have a connection with someone that is just that the precedent is no judgment on like whatever you're putting forth, even if it sucks, like who cares? We all write stuff that sucks. Like we're just gonna find the best thing. So yeah, that was a really awesome process, honestly. It was just a lot of work in a short amount of time. Because like you said, the album's 12 songs. I mean, some of those songs are shorter. We tried to keep it as short as possible, funny enough. Like, it was like, I wanted a really short album, but I was like, I think this is the album. Like, I don't think I need all these songs to be in there. So I think it was just what needed to happen, but still working on, 35 minutes of music for 2 weeks is just like probably not enough time. But yeah, we did what we could.
It's impressive. It's impressive because, again, pretty, yeah, like you said, it's not like an overly long time-wise album, but there's a lot of tracks on here. And that obviously take a lot of effort. You guys have a lot of energy that goes into these. That's very like a lot of the songs like hit the ground running, full stop, like from start to finish, in a great way. When it comes to kind of the production side of this, did you guys self-produce this? Did you go to somebody else to kind of do the bells and whistles with this? Was it more DIY? What was kind of the process there?
No, we recorded with Andy Nelson at Bricktop Studios in Chicago.
Okay, so you guys came out here to record it. That's nice. That's legit. Yeah. No kidding. Were a lot of the sort of like again, I'm using the word theatrical, but you know what I mean, of like the sort of samples and like especially like the beginning with obituaries where you literally have this call out of like, here's an album that the government's going to hate and churches are going to hate. Was that something you guys had the idea for? Was that something that the producer kind of brought in? Where did these kind of ideas come from?
Most of those ideas were cooked up afterward. I kind of I wanted the album to have a lot of like tie-ins and just like it was just important to me that the album had like some sort of flow, and I just kind of like sat with the album. We had recorded it and like I had it without like the transitions and stuff, just with like the songs, and that's when I kind of started to like tack on all these things and add in stuff. I mean, there are certain ones that maybe were more ideas from the get-go, but yeah, something I gathered over a little bit of time and just honestly was my influence from like kind of the hip-hop world of just like, I don't know, I just wanted there to be like very kind of cool ways that these songs come together and ebb and flow. Like at the end of the day, we're an album band, I feel. So I praise the album. I want to make cool albums. I want to make things that people want to listen to all the way through. And, maybe it is stupid to make like, I don't know, a 12-song album that has a lot of like, intros and outros and stuff like that. But you kind of just got to do what you want to do, that your heart feels, you got to believe in what you want. And so I just kind of went for it on that front. But specifically that intro is from a comedian, Bill Hicks. And
yeah.
It's him doing an interview and he's talking to the interviewer and he's like, I think he says that's the sticker on his album that he had, like his CD he had released. That was like the warning label on the album. But when I heard it and I heard the way he said it, I just kind of like was like, yeah, that's sick. And it encapsulates a lot of how we feel. And I mean, Bill Hicks was very, very iconic for me from a young age. I was very into him. So, and he definitely shaped some of my thinking and I don't know, shaped my taste for comedy and stuff. So yeah, I had to throw it back for him.
Yeah, and Bill Hicks, along with like you can throw George Carlin out there and several others of that sort of. They're not like I mean they are pretty much the same era, but like I say era, George Carlin was around for like 7 decades doing comedy. So what era are we talking about? But
Yeah.
those kind of guys that pushed boundaries on like what was funny, and what could be talked about is kind of like what shaped comedy. And I think if you write music that has any sort of like social political messaging or commentary on the world, whether it's big sarcastic or serious or talking about specific issues or whatever the case may be, or just having like counterculture energy, which is like what a lot of like metal, hardcore, emo, post-hardcore has. That's why people enjoy it. You gotta like give a little bit of like an homage to the kind of like thought leaders on that, which is like old school pushing the boundaries comedians, which really like shaped what like it might maybe this is me being too hoity toity, but I think about this stuff a lot and learned a lot from comedians like Bill Hicks and George Carlin, where like, you know, people were laughing at things and then they were laughing at it, and then you end up thinking about these topics that they're covering in like a somewhat serious way that you maybe didn't before, that you don't see from like school or the news or whatever. And so that makes a lot of sense to throw in if you just kind of have, even if like, I was going to ask you this, breaking down the album, I'm sure that your vocalist probably writes a lot of the lyrics. I would guess like that's like what vocalists tend to do, or maybe I'm wrong on that. But
Me and him both do
okay,
vocal. We kind of split it, but there are definitely songs where he writes the majority of the lyrics. There are the songs where I write more of the lyrics. So it's kind of like a back and forth.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But you know what I mean. Like I'm sure that kind of having that influence in the back, it just helps you like remember like how you can. It's I don't know. It's fun to like think about those guys when you're making music like this that you've done that has like some poignant lines and things like that throughout it, that you can kind of pull from these inspirations of like what I would say are like some classic comedians that like broke down how people could speak about the world that they're seeing around them. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah,
kind of a cool homage at the very start of the album.
for sure. And
Um,
I just thought it rocked to kick it off. And like I said, like, I don't know, big inspiration to me. And I think he's one of the most like unique comedians. And like you said, like a lot of thought provoking stuff, but like kind of literally, I learned history from him because like
yeah,
Bill Hicks ain't from like my era at all. Like I understood some of the jokes when I first got into him, but like it was rewatching and then eventually learning about and like finding out what he's talking about when it comes to like all the kind of political commentary he's making. It's like there's a lot of stuff of like the older Bush era and Reagan
mm-hmm.
kind of politics, which he like talks about that a lot. All the stuff before 9/11 that happened out in the Middle East. It's like that he has like 10 minutes of bits about that kind of stuff, and I didn't know what he was talking about at first, but it was engaging enough to get me interested in it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also interesting to hear that, or like one of my favorite George Carlin albums, I'd have to look up the name of it, came out around that same era. I think it was like maybe the Clinton era or maybe like the first Bush era or something. And he's talking about some politicians or whatever in it. And I was like, I have no idea who these people are. But the through line is when you hear the critique he's making, you could just change the names and it would probably work perfectly fine today. Like a Mad Lib of like entering in some people's names, which is always
My gosh.
funny, but a little depressing at the same time. You know what I mean?
That's
Um,
how she goes.
that is how it goes. It's a cycle, unfortunately. Well, I'm not going to ask you to break down every single one of these tracks in detail when it comes to the songwriting and lyricism. But you said you and your vocalist both kind of spearhead these lyrics on songs depending upon the case. Is there a specific one or two that you had more of a hand in, or maybe not, or maybe ones that you just enjoy what the song's about more lyrically that you could kind of break down for me off of the record?
Well, I mean, I'd say I have lyrics on almost every song. There's probably like a select few that like I didn't write anything on. Is there anything I didn't write anything on? I think maybe Bane of My Existence. I don't think I wrote anything on. But yeah, other than that, I think I definitely had a hand in at least most of my parts on the album. Now, I will say, like, Purgatory Blues, for example. That one is a cool collaborative one for me because, like, I had written a melody to my part in the song with some lyrics, and then when we went to lay down the demo vocals, Dave came in with these lyrics and laid them down in such a way that I was like, I cannot use what I wrote because, like, it doesn't fit with your lyrics enough. I feel like this has to fit together in a cool way. So actually, technically, I didn't really write anything on Purgatory Blues because Dave rewrote the lyrics to my melody. I basically like did the melody without any like words there, and he just like filled in the blanks, and that was a really cool experience. Dave normally does not write any lyrics for me to sing. He doesn't really like usually do that sort of thing. So for him to write like my kind of hook to the song like was really cool to me. It felt like a very cool collaboration that just like I love stuff like that, and it makes me definitely appreciate the song more in a different way. And I think the lyrics that song came out really cool, you know. And I can kind of touch on what Dave kind of was talking about in that song, but I think mostly, I mean, Purgatory Blues. I mean, it's the idea of kind of, you know, being in between heaven and hell. But it's kind of almost a nightmare horror movie, kind of like just the worst kind of thing chasing you or being hunted down on like there's a lot of themes that kind of coincide with like horror movies and ghosts and whatnot on this album. Obviously the ghosts are a big part of it, but yeah, I feel like the imagery is very much there when you just like read some of the lyrics in Purgatory Blues, which is like Dave is very direct and to the point with his lyrics, and my lyrics I feel like are not as not as ambiguous, but somehow like less to the point. I'm like more wordy with my shit. We're kind of different writers, but if we go over to like Kingsport Curse, I wrote a good amount of the lyrics on that, at least all the lyrics that I did, and I have a couple parts in that song. And yeah, that was a very pissed off song for me. I was just like, I was trying to write to that demo for a while. You know, that was always on repeat. I think I had a few different things written to it, and I just wanted to get it right. But at some point, I started to take a few things together, and I was kind of just putting out some energy out there about someone who, like, you know, one of the few people that I really don't like in this world, you know, and just like someone who like used to be really close, who is someone you do not like look at and consider a friend anymore, you know.
Right.
You look at them the opposite. So that was a lot of energy towards that, and then some to kind of the system that we live under, you know, the way people take snapshots of one thing and change the whole narrative to fit their own shit, and just kind of the repurposing of information to confuse the masses and have them all fighting. But, you know, it was just a little bit of touching on stuff like that. A lot of my writing is just very from the mind, stream of consciousness sort of stuff, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you can do that and make it poignant for each track, right? And you're not just like generally yelling into the void, which there's songs for that as well. But like if you're able to do that, that's fantastic. I'm jealous of that. I have to like literally like sit down, think about a topic, look up things that are referencing that topic. I almost like write a little sheet that has to have sources on it, like a Wikipedia page.
That's
almost
cool,
or something for me. Yeah,
that's
it's cool, but it's a lot. It's too much work. You know, it's you know.
For sure. I get what you mean. I started appreciating like kind of storytelling songwriters a lot in the last 5 years or so, and feel like that's influenced me, but I'm not really good at like writing stories. I want to get better at it, but I'm like a very personal sort of person for the most part.
Yeah.
I don't really usually write from anyone's perspective but my own. Like there may be some cases where it's like general, or like sometimes if I am writing to a song that Dave already has most of the lyrics for, I will be influenced by what he writes and maybe try and bring in something specific to that sort of deal.
Yeah.
But the other
Goes back to the
song,
collaboration piece of it for you guys, like very collaborative aspect of give and take, right?
yeah, and it's just cool when you can be collaborative. You don't always need to be. For example, the song Phantom Growing Pains, I think other than save like a few lines in the song, maybe just a couple of Dave's lines, I think I wrote all the lyrics to that song, including like all of Dave's parts too. Like, except like I said, like a few lines. But so we've had like one or two of those on our first album too. And sometimes that just happens where it's like Dave's not really catching anything specific on it, or sometimes I just like kind of do have vocal ideas and do just like write to something. It's rare, but like every once in a while I get that bug, and that kind of happened with Phantom Growing Pains, where I'd written a couple parts just kind of naturally, and then Dave was like, well, you already have this much and I don't got anything for it, and I was like, all right, I'll finish it off. And so that's kind of how I wrote most of that one. And that one, Phantom Growing Pains, is kind of like a healing kind of story sort of deal. Just learning to love yourself, because if you don't love yourself, you're probably going to be dead. Like, it's just like, it's hard. It's hard to love yourself. You got to learn to do it. You got to kind of like change the way your mind thinks when you have like very bad tendencies and views about yourself, trying to heal from shit that like you've done to wrong other people, and the past relationships you've had with people, whether they're friendships or dating, where it's like you have to live with that shit for the rest of your life and think about it. And so it's like you have to overcome the past so you can become a better person and just be the best you can be. And as long as you're taking steps, it doesn't really matter, but you gotta take steps. You gotta take a step. And one of those first steps is being able to kind of say, okay, like, I got to be better than I was yesterday. And that's a lot of what that song's about for me.
It makes sense with the song title as well. It's that's a universal feeling, I think. Anybody that's ever been introspective in their life can relate to. There's a lot of people that maybe have never had that thought cross their mind. Sometimes you feel like you interact with a lot of those people. Very, very relatable song for sure. Thanks for going over those. Is there, since I don't know if you've seen any of the clips or anything from this show, but at times I talk. I'm just referencing this from the very beginning of the podcast, or the beginning of the album. I talk a lot of like social political topics with people. You don't have, there doesn't have to be that. All these songs are fucking fantastic on their own merit regardless. But is there any sort of song on here that you wrote that, you talked about personal issues with somebody that, is not worth your time anymore with Kingsport Curse and things of that nature, talking about these kind of growing pains of taking steps to better yourself and think of yourself more positively while also acknowledging, maybe past mistakes and growing from them and things of that nature. Are there any sort of like outward social political commentary sort of things from this album? Is a lot more introspective in general, track by track? And if, just kind of, is there any song kind of in that vein?
Well, I'd say Kingsport is pretty in that vein like with some of it. But I would say another one like that for me is Still Collide. And Still Collide, my lyrics in it, I am talking personally, but also kind of my feelings on the world as well. Like I have a line in there where I say something about like condemned by the state we live in, we were never meant to thrive. And on one hand, that kind of just relates to me personally, how I feel about growing up in an area that is generally like kind of less wealthy, like my opportunities weren't necessarily as good if I would have grown up in certain other areas. Like my school barely, like I said, had like a band, like let alone like the
Right.
idea of like a jazz band, or like at one point our music program just got canceled. So it's like we didn't have like a lot of things. So on one hand it's kind of relating to that, but like also the idea of like there are a lot of people being condemned by the state they live in. You know, it's like they literally don't want you to thrive. They want to hold you back. They are try to make it illegal to exist and be what you are. Just
Mm.
if you're not what meets the status quo. And so yeah, there's some lines in there that kind of relate to that sort of thing. I mean, as with like everything else with our music, there's just a lot. And I think if you listen and you read or you just absorb it, there's a lot to think about, whether it's about yourself or about the world, that you can look at our lyrics and kind of relate to. We put a lot into every song, and for some people that could be a little overbearing. They want like strip back and less, and we did even try to strip it back a little bit more in this album than we did on the last one. But at the end of the day, we have a lot of things we want to say. We have a lot of kind of things we want to cover, and just personal, standards we have for what a song should be and what a song can be, and like how, like, I don't know, trying to stand out and be yourself, when sometimes I feel like it's way easier to just do the thing that everyone else is doing, you know?
Follow the trends. Yeah, especially when you're trying to promote your band, right? Like when it comes to, whether it's like a length of a song or what you're trying to do in the song when it comes to trends, or the way you promote yourself, be it, on the ground or more and more online, obviously through social media. It can be easy to kind of get in that trap of suddenly becoming like, content creators for Instagram or TikTok or something, or
And that
following
that
the
shit's
trends of where music's
crazy.
going, right? And then next thing you know, you're not even the band is not about making music anymore. It's about making 30-second clips, right?
And
Like, you
honestly,
know,
that's a big thing I've been wrestling with, because like it all relates back to like kind of being in the middle of nowhere, like, and the way the band has been set up. We're lucky enough that Anthony is actually going to be moving in with me soon, and so we'll be able to work on music a lot more. But for now, he's been living in Connecticut, so that's very not close.
yeah,
Like I said, he started as a fill-in, so he kind of joined as a fill-in from far away. So it's been not the easiest to do a lot of things as a band, and so it puts us at kind of a disadvantage when it comes to like playing shows and like just even starting a tour and creating content. Like, it's not easy to create content when you're not with someone and when you're all adults who work jobs and whatnot.
yeah,
So yeah, it's been hard wrestling with like the social media stuff. I feel like I've been kind of like out of tune with it. I used to be more in tune, but like it's become such a stressor that like I try to like not think about it, but I do think about it a lot. And yeah, when I think about wanting to do that sort of thing, I'm just like, I would much prefer just like making a song or something, and
right,
like having to do all these things. But if you genuinely enjoy it, you should do it. And I think I do enjoy some aspect of like
of
that
course.
sort of thing too. But it's just when you're an adult and your time is so spread thin. And the most important thing to me is just like the music I write. And while I want all this other stuff to be good, it's hard to find time to prioritize every single one of them. So I hope I can find a balance, and especially soon with Anthony moving down here, we'll probably be able to make some cool videos and stuff. We're gonna be like kind of trying to get together a studio and whatnot,
Oh,
and
nice.
do more like home recordings and kind of shit like that. So definitely am trying to get more out there on the internet as it is. But for we're just playing shows and touring and posting some shit every once in a while.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, and this is what I say to bands all the time, especially ones that I'll talk to kind of on that topic, is like, the solace that you could have even when it comes to that sort of like feel or pull to kind of do those things more. You'll see like I'll hear things of like record label people telling people on their label like you need to share on social media 5 times a day, like that kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, but if the music isn't like, the music's good, so like that's why people will stay, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you make a million videos to try to trap some, get some audience or whatever, but the songs aren't to the tier that you guys have set with this, especially with this album that you're putting out in just a couple of weeks. If the music's not good, it doesn't matter the sort of like hustle culture bullshit you do if you don't take the time, and also take the time to rest, but take the time to make the songs the best that they can be, right? Because like at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, that's what's gonna get people to check out a band, is if the band puts out good music, which you guys are doing. So you're doing it right. And like, I think there's something too, especially as people that are, working jobs and, doing full-time things while doing a band. Like it's important to like not burn yourself out on it and then end up making music just another task, right? Like
Yeah,
another
yeah.
another thing you have to do as opposed to what you
Mm-hmm.
enjoy doing, which is the songs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it can definitely get to that point. I mean, I've felt that kind of thing because, like, it's like I was working so much at some points and was so busy that it was like when I would get a window of time where I could work on music, it was like if I didn't work on music right then, it was like the craziest kind of guilt would ensue because it was like it's what I really needed to do, and I like didn't want to or couldn't bring myself or nothing really came out or I just like fucking, just shit something out and, wasn't feeling it, didn't finish it or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to have that healthy relationship with creating and just
Mm-hmm.
doing what you need to do. You should do it because you're passionate about it, not because you feel like you have to. And if anything, that's like made me excited to get back on the road more and play because like I feel like nowadays people appreciate bands who play out more than they did
Yeah.
a handful of years ago. In our old band, I kind of toured endlessly and just never really garnered too much of it. I mean, also like I make better music now, I believe, but you know, I just think that is being rewarded more playing out. So I'm excited that we have an album now coming out that we can tour on and people can listen to it and tell us what they think about it.
And that brings us to a kind of a great conclusion here for the conversation. James, thanks so much for going over this again,
You're
breaking down the
welcome.
album Counterfeit Recollections, again out May 2nd. So just a week from this upcoming Friday. Absolutely fantastic record. Everyone should check it out. If you're into any heavy alternative music vein, it's got something for you there. Thanks so much for your time here, James. I got 2 questions for you. Just tell me, obviously we know that you got the album coming out, so that's one thing, but tell me what's kind of coming next for the band, what you guys plan on doing, whether it's touring, promoting the album, etc. And then I always play a song at the end, so we're obviously going to play something from Counterfeit Recollections. So you just got to pick a song from the album for people to hear if they've never heard the band for the first time at the end of the recording. So again, what I guess I should have said, what's going on with the band, do your plugs where people can find you, and then pick a song.
You can find us at fallfiftyfeet.com. Fall 50 Feet on all socials. Just look up Fall 50 Feet, all one word, no spaces, no numbers. It's one word. It's Fall 50 Feet. And we're going on tour in June with a band called Princess. They're from Pittsburgh. They rock. And then we'll be touring in the fall too, doing a long tour. So you'll get a chance to see us if you live in the United States, if the shit doesn't burn down before that.
It's a big if, yeah.
Yeah, and we're doing a release show. I think we might also be announcing. Well, this come out later, but tomorrow I think we're announcing it. So June 15th in Wheeling, West Virginia. we are playing.
That's awesome. Well, again, James, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Again, fantastic album. And then you got to pick. I'm not going to pick it. You got to pick what song
you really
plays at the end for people to hear.
Put me on the spot like this.
That's right. That's right. Do it to everybody else. You're not immune from it.
Dewey Cox has to think about his entire life before he picks his song.
I haven't heard a Dewey Cox reference in quite some time. That's fantastic.
Earl Sweatshirt has a Dewey Cox reference on his last album.
Now I gotta all the more reason to check it out.
Check it out. Yep. All right, one song to send off with. I guess we could do a Still Collide. I really like
we talked about that one a little bit. That was kind of what you talked a little bit more about the topic of. So that makes a lot of sense for the podcast.
It's a rocker.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a fantastic one. Every song on this record is though. So I get why it was a tough pick. But yep, we're gonna play Still Collide off of the new album Counterfeit Recollections from Fall 50 Feet out of West Virginia on the Powerless Podcast. Thanks, James, so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.